Hi everyone, Chris Mannion here with Sonar Talent Intelligence, and today I'm going to share the walkthrough for a case that I just wrote up on data-driven recruiting. Now, this case is suitable for anyone who is either currently going through a recruiting interview process, who is trying to get a role as a recruiter, especially with a company that is more data-driven. So think any of the big tech companies or anyone that's really innovating in the recruiting space, but also for anyone that's actually recruiting recruiters potentially for the first time. This case is designed to help you walk through the full recruiting process with a potential candidate and really get a good gauge on how strong they're going to be as they're as you're considering them for a role. So we'll jump straight into it. The link to the document will be in the comment section below. You'll also be able to see all of the kind of the model answers that are created in a separate spreadsheet. If you've got any additional questions, please then drop them in the comment below. If you see any errors in the case, I would love to update this and just keep this available as a free resource for anyone who really needs it, which going into 2024, as we are right now, I think is a lot of people. So let's dive straight in. So this is really a 5-part case interview. Now, for those who haven't done a case before, the case is really designed to give you a situation and see how you perform in a real life situation that you are potentially going to be in when you join a company. So this is a case as if you are a new recruiter and you've just been assigned to support a sales and marketing organization within a large company. I've set the company here as Sonar Talent, but you can use this for whatever size company you are currently supporting. So there's a link to the sample answers here, and we'll look at those in a moment when we actually get to the data part of it. But really, the case is designed to be able to walk through the whole process and really capture every part of the recruiting funnel and process, and give the recruiter an opportunity to share all their insights, as well as work with live data and give the recruiting interviewer a chance to understand whether this person can actually do the role that they're interviewing for. So let me walk you through each part of the process. So there are 5 questions, and the timeline guidance for the whole of the 5 questions is designed to be about 25 minutes. So this should be really a part of a 45-minute interview process. When you think about a 5-minute intro where you're actually going to build rapport with a candidate, a little flex to actually get the recruiting process started, and then the 25 minutes, which will probably extend to 30 plus when you actually start to add in guidelines and kind of follow-up questions. And then you also want to leave, 5 to 10 minutes at the end of every interview so that you can give the candidate a chance to ask you questions. So I would recommend this as part of a 45-minute interview process. Now, the first question is really designed to just kick off with the candidate sharing what they know about the recruiting process. So you know that the candidate is joining the sales and marketing team in this case, and they should start to think about what questions will they need to ask for their very first meeting with their business stakeholders. So I've got a list of potential questions here. What are the business priorities for the coming year? What does the current team leadership look like? Who will be involved in the recruiting process? What are the historic attrition rates, and why are people leaving the organization? Just to try and understand a little bit about the brand of the company and also of the team. And you're thinking about how do you prioritize roles for the coming year. So you can see the scoring guidelines here, where we actually want someone to come up with really good, strong, rational questions and actually tie them back to what they understand about the business, especially the overarching business, but also what they expect the specific team to do in advance. This will also give you an indication as to whether this person has actually spent some time on coffee chats talking to current employees within that organization, which is a good sign that this person is pretty engaged and is thinking about the right things. Second question is actually thinking a little bit more about what the recruiter would do when they're trying to influence their business stakeholders. So how do they think about prioritizing the different roles, and how do they communicate with the stakeholders? So in this case, we're going to assume that the stakeholder doesn't really understand how to prioritize different roles, and so it's on the recruiter to influence them. And we have these planned requisitions. So we have a marketing and sales team. We have the number of open roles that we have got approved for the coming year. And this is what the recruiter will be handling. So we want them to think about, where do they start here? And now they can continue to ask questions. But what we really want them to do is get to this point where you're able to tell them that, hey, we've got a VP of sales who's in role. Revenue growth is the most critical factor for the coming year. So in this situation, what do you prioritize? In that case, what I would want them to point towards is this mid-level sales position. The reason being, if they can hire the mid-level sales managers, then they can start to hire the more junior folks to support them, but those mid-level people will actually be able to be involved in the recruiting process. Otherwise, you could potentially get to this situation where you have a lot of junior employees but no management team. So not only can they not be assessed, but also they're not going to be managed and have a terrible onboarding, so they will attrit pretty quickly. So you kind of want the recruiter to start thinking about the implications and the sequencing of how they want to do things. Now comes the real data. So what we're doing here is looking at the historic funnel and pass-through rates and trying to help them understand what does a current funnel look like, and get them to use this data to figure out how long is it going to take to fill these roles, and how am I going to communicate that back to my stakeholder, but also what are the different kind of processes that I will need to think about putting in place. And so what we're looking for here is a recruiter who can build this bottoms up funnel to get from the number of total profiles at the top of the funnel to the number of hires at the bottom. Now, if you click through to the sample spreadsheet here, you can see the numbers live here, but you can see the answer that I came up with. And this doesn't always necessarily need to be the right answer. The first step should always be about the same. And if you're not going to use a calculator, you can make rough estimates to each. But what you can see here is that I've started with the total hires that we need to make, which is 6. This is for the mid-level sales role. And then for each one, I just divide the number of hires by the pass-through rate, which gives me 12 offers needed to get 6 hires. Because if you go into the data sheet, you can see, let me move my head out of the way, you can see that the offer accept rate for mid-level sales roles is actually 50%. So in order to get 6 hires, you need to make 12 offers. And that kind of like works back through, you go all the way back through the funnel, and you wind up with 2,560 profile reviews at the top of the funnel. And it could be like, plus or minus 10% if you're going to make some estimates. Really, it's a ballpark figure that you want to get to here, so that the recruiter will understand how many things they need to do, how many activities they need to complete in order to hit their hiring goal by the end of the year. The next step in the process is to then tie that back to activities per week to give an estimate of how long it's going to take to fill these roles. Now, this is where we don't really have hard data to share with the recruiter. We actually want them to use their experience to actually make estimates on how long it's going to take. So in this case, I've made a couple of rough estimates. So assume the recruiter can maybe do 60 profile reviews per day, which is 300 per week. They can potentially do 40 recruiter screens per week. Think of that as 8 per day, so 1 per hour. Maybe the hiring manager screens. The hiring managers are brought in to do 2 screens per day, so that's 10 per week, and then 1 interview per day. And then maybe you want to give 48 hours in between each offer to actually give the candidate a chance to respond. So really, that probably maxes out at 3 a week. If we calculate the total time it takes them to complete each of these, based on the total number of activities, we can figure out it's going to take about 35 weeks to fill all these roles. Now, this is obviously a very rough estimate because you've got concurrent activity happening. So, maybe you just fill the top of the funnel and you can actually move people through very quickly. And a good recruiter could actually then start to see potential gaps in the recruiting process. We're not really going to test that at this point, but they could maybe look at this funnel and say, well, why is the recruiter screen to hiring manager screen so low? And you could potentially get into the reasons why. We don't really want to focus on that because that's not what we're testing here, unless it's really for a recruiting enablement role. But this is just something that you probably want to be prepared to answer if you have those kind of questions. So let's go back into the case. So a good candidate is going to build that funnel. They're actually going to predict how long each stage will take and actually give you that rough estimate. Say, okay, to fill all these roles, it's going to take about 35 weeks. Now we're going to fill roles in addition to that. It might take a little bit longer, or we may get a bit of a tailwind if we actually have some candidates already in process, and there's all these different factors. But really, it's the data that we want the recruiter to use and be confident that they are able to deliver the right estimate at the end of that calculation and be able to communicate that back to their stakeholders. Because think about the additional work that is going to be involved in maintaining that communication throughout the recruiting process. Step 4 is actually really where I think a lot of recruiting interviews normally sit. But what we've done before we've got to this point is we've actually started to prioritize all the different elements from the business side and then come up with a more data-driven recommendation. So in this case, we know to fill these 6 roles, it's going to take 35 weeks. We know the funnel metrics. So how are we actually going to build the funnel in order to deliver against those? Now, this can really go off in a number of different directions. I've given some sample deep dive discussions here. Um, I think depending on the market and the company, you're probably going to be looking at outbound sourcing really for most of these kind of roles. But I really want them to start thinking about, can they actually generate referrals? Can they actually get the current sales team to sit down on a LinkedIn page and go through their current network to figure out if there's anyone that they know that they would want to recommend? And so think about um, the types of work that are going to need to be done in order to fill those roles most effectively. So there's going to be sourcing, but we know that referrals are actually a really good way to generate hires pretty quickly. So maybe a couple of those roles will come from referrals. Maybe there's an internal candidate that could be a good fit, in which case you can promote someone into that role and actually have to fill a more junior role, which is more uh, cost effective and faster to fill. So really you want the recruiter to be thinking a little bit more holistically about filling the roles rather than just say, for example, saying, okay, I'm going to post this role on LinkedIn and then I'm going to watch my funnel as people apply to the inbound job posting through our job board. It generally isn't going to work for a mid-level role, and so you actually want them to be very proactive in how they're thinking about building that funnel so that they hit their recruiting targets. So the final thing, and this is really testing the ability of the recruiter to summarize all these kind of key components together and communicate to an executive level stakeholder. So in this case, the CHRO's chief people officer, whatever the kind of key role is going to come and ask them, okay, what's your plan to fill these roles? This could be, in a real life situation, as they're about to go into an exec level meeting, they actually want to understand how the recruiting process is expecting to go for the coming year, because maybe they're trying to make recommendations on overall headcount, or maybe there's a contentious issue that's involved between the different kind of senior stakeholders. So you want them to be able to brief the CHRO within 2 minutes, and this is a really good kind of way to test that. Some candidates will not be able to synthesize what's going on and maybe get a little bit lost trying to communicate that back. This is a good time to find that out, to see who the strong candidates are and who the potential candidates are that are not really going to deliver on exactly what you need for this kind of role. So that's it. That's a wrap. If you've got any additional questions, please drop them in the comment section below. You'll see other links to my videos, and I'm going to produce more like this. So please subscribe if you like this kind of content. And I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.